3 in 10 American households don't have any life insurance. Half say they need more life insurance. And many people realize that life insurance is an important way to provide for their families. But buying life insurance can seem daunting. How do you know if you're picking the best coverage for you and your family? I'm Dan Ringer, and we'll talk about life insurance right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
Do you need life insurance? Perhaps the better question is, does your family need insurance on your life? My guest is Michael Oliverio II. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Hey, good to be here with you.
You are a life insurance agent.
Yes, sir.
You're on that list with lawyers and used car dealers that people really don't want to encounter. Sometimes that's unfair. I think it's unfair because I believe you help people. You've been an agent for 25 years now.
That's right. That's
so
right.
You've seen most of it, probably heard about all of it.
That's right. It's a great profession. You have an opportunity to help people in the present and help them prepare for the future.
What's the purpose of life insurance? What is it for?
You know, there are lots of different purposes of life insurance, and maybe they can be broken down into the personal setting, maybe we refer to as the mom and pop setting, then maybe the small business type setting, and then other maybe larger corporations as to how they use life insurance. But in general, we're protecting against the loss of somebody dying prematurely. It may be used as an asset to grow some cash value. Sometimes life insurance is purchased to protect against the risk of somebody becoming uninsurable. They buy a lot maybe when they're young and healthy so that if something happens to their health later in life, they still have sufficient coverage. So usually we're trying to protect a family home by being able to pay off a mortgage in the event of someone's death, maybe educate young children in the event of a premature death, and just provide for family, loved ones, sometimes in the business setting, the continuation of a business, the buyout of a partner. Those types of things are how life insurance is used both in the personal setting and in the business or corporate setting.
One thing I'm always fascinated at is more than one person gets together to do a business and they form a partnership. You may not know you're forming a partnership, but you do. Legally you form a partnership. And then when one dies, that person's estate gets their interest in the partnership, and the people who are the heirs in that estate may want to have nothing to do with the business, but they own half of it.
That's right. That's
right. That's where buying out that interest becomes important.
Yes. You know, some people just simply think of life insurance in the personal setting, insurance on dad and mom or something like that, but life insurance is used throughout personal setting and in the small business arena, and used by some of the biggest corporations in America to fund retirement benefits and other benefits to people who work for their companies.
Well, and there's a form of life insurance that many, especially larger businesses have. It's called key man insurance, where you're really important to my business, and if something were to happen to you, I might be able to replace you, but I would certainly have to spend a lot of time and resources in finding somebody to replace you. So an insurance policy on your life that would pay to my business might be a good idea to cover the losses that your absence causes.
Correct. And those represent, a minority of the life insurance sales. Most life insurance is sold in that personal marketplace to people who may be viewing this show tonight that are interested in protecting their home, educating their children, meeting other financial obligations they may have in the event that they die prematurely, while at the same time maybe transitioning those life insurance needs into figuring out how can they keep this life insurance in force their whole life, as opposed to just for a period of time in a family setting.
That's worth talking about because of the way you and I met. I fess up. Mike's my life insurance agent. That's why he's on this program, and you have been for nearly 25 years now when you first got started. And the way it came about was he called one day. I guess you and I met because we were both doing volunteer work with the American Heart Association. Mm-hmm. And you called me and said, I want to talk to you about insurance. Now that's the call everybody's afraid of. They think, oh my heavens, a life insurance agent's going to call me, he's going to come in, he's going to try to sell me something. But what you did was start asking me questions. And you asked me what kind of insurance I had, how much insurance did I have, and then you started asking me if I thought that was going to be enough under the circumstances. It was a good call. I'm always appreciated the fact that you made it.
We refer to that as a needs analysis, where you go out and gather information, the insurance that someone has already, what their goals are in the event something happens to them prematurely, and maybe even retirement goals, and try to integrate all those things into a plan, and then bring the product in as to what would be appropriate for that person. There's two very different types of life insurance. I think of them sometimes as being on a continuum. One end is the term insurance, life insurance for a term, and on the other end, whole life insurance, sometimes referred to as permanent insurance, which is life insurance that stays in force for your whole life. And part of the job of an insurance professional is to go out and gather the facts, identify the person's needs, and then make recommendations that make sense to them, both in the short run, if something were to happen, but also for the long haul, for somebody who, such as you, has been a client of mine for 24 years. And so that's the balancing act of trying to make those initial recommendations with potentially changes or increases over time to help somebody meet their needs.
When should a person first have insurance on their life?
Some families, both parents and even in some cases grandparents, will buy life insurance policies after a child is born. And they're not buying that life insurance policy with the idea of replacing that child. No amount of money could replace a child. What they're doing is they're buying a small policy that would include provisions to add additional policies potentially during that child's adult years. So it's a way of protecting that child's insurability. Should that child have health problems, or should that child take up a risky occupation or avocations or hobbies that may be dangerous, such that a life insurance company might be less likely to insure the child or may be inclined to not insure them at all, an initial policy would be in place that then could be added to without stipulations in the future. So some families will start as early as a child being literally a few weeks or a few months old. But many people who don't maybe have parents or grandparents thinking in that way find themselves coming out of school, entering the workforce, maybe getting married, maybe purchasing their first home, and beginning to sense that, hey, this is an area maybe where I haven't taken any action yet, but I should. And so, there are times we work with people in that type of situation. They're maybe making their very first life insurance purchase. It may be one of their very first kind of adult decisions as to, hey, I really want to get this right, and I want to provide for my new wife, my new husband, provide for this home that we've just bought so that it could be paid off if something happens. So that's certainly a part of our planning, is helping them get off on the right foot.
One thing that you didn't mention, and that I have seen several times in my career, and people, you don't like to think about this, but why would you buy a life insurance policy on a child? If that first policy might be just a very few $1,000s. You have a child, And if something happens to that child, they die as a result of some event, you're going to have funeral expenses, and at least, as importantly, you're going to be, well, unhappy for a period of time and maybe unable to work. It's not a bad idea to have a policy of insurance there to protect against that, to make sure that if you have to use up your vacation time or take family medical leave oftentimes is unpaid time off from work. You're allowed to do it if you work for a large enough company, but you don't get paid. You can take up to 12 weeks of that. You need to replace that income. Life insurance can serve that purpose too, so that you can mourn, you can get over the loss, and then get back into the workplace. So there are a lot of reasons to insure young children. And you talked about the ability to purchase more life insurance. Most life insurance policies like that have provisions that after 10 years or however many years it is, you can buy more life insurance and then more after that, right, without a physical examination.
Mm-hmm. You know, take the example of a family that was proactive, purchased a policy on a very young child, and maybe during the child's teenage years, the child became a juvenile diabetic. You know, the chances of that child buying life insurance during their adult years would be impaired dramatically at that point, maybe even unable to buy life insurance. But if a child had that policy purchased by mom and dad or grandpa that was in place, when they got to certain age changes during their adult years, they would be able to buy more life insurance at the very best rates, maybe the rate that they were insured at when they were younger. And so it's a way of just really what we refer to as protecting the child's insurability. That child has every much desire when they're 30 years old, 35-year-old, to provide life insurance to their spouse and provide protection for their home and their children. So this just maybe gives them that opportunity if they plan properly.
We're talking about life insurance. My guest is Michael A. Oliverio II. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. And I'll bet you there are people sitting at home saying, God, that guy looks familiar. I've seen it. You're a former West Virginia state senator.
That's right. That's right. And been a life insurance agent all that time.
That's Well, you talked about two different types of insurance, and there's actually a continuum in there. There's term insurance and whole insurance. Now, I'm a young man. I'm just getting started in life. Maybe I am married and I maybe have one child. Which would I prefer to purchase there, term or whole life?
You know, after doing that needs analysis that we discussed, we might be able to identify how much life insurance you need. And maybe that number is $500,000 of life insurance, let's say. Well, a $500,000 whole life insurance policy on a person, say 30 years old, based on maybe the income that they're making at that time.
And assuming they're healthy and insurable.
Yeah, may be just cost prohibitive. They just may simply not be able to afford that amount. Whereas a term insurance policy may be very affordable to them, to the point where, you know, it may be $25, $30, $35 a month, and all of a sudden they have $500,000 of life insurance protection. And so something like that may meet your needs at that point. You may have a few extra dollars to work with, and you may say, hey, you know what, I'd like to get a lot of this term insurance and meet most of the need that I have, but maybe I want to buy a little bit of whole life insurance too, so that I have some life insurance that will remain in force for my whole life and that will accumulate some cash values. I like to use the example of somebody who rents an apartment, which is kind of like buying term insurance. You know, when you rent an apartment, you pay money for the right to live there. And maybe every year that you live there, the rent goes up a little bit. And over time, you eventually move out. And while you don't get to take anything with you when you move out, you did have the right to live there. That's kind of like term insurance. You buy the insurance policy, maybe every year it goes up a little bit in costs. If you die, there's a death benefit to your family. But if you don't die and the term comes to an end, everything's done. Whereas whole life insurance is a little bit more like buying a house. You may enter into a 30-year mortgage with a fixed premium that's never going to go up, called a mortgage payment. And in that house environment, you have the value of the home going up over time, and you have the equity in the home growing over time. So we've got a fixed mortgage payment, growing equity, and you hope a growing value in the home. Similar to a whole life insurance policy, a fixed premium, cash value growing, and potentially a death benefit that is growing as well. So really two different types of insurance. A young person like that, the primary focus at that point is having enough death benefit and protecting their insurability going forward. So we'd probably see a recommendation of a significant amount of term insurance and maybe some whole life insurance to begin some savings and accumulation of cash value.
You have to, when you're making this decision, think about, what do I need money for? If I'm here and I'm going to accumulate money through work and other ways of doing it, investments and like that, what am I going to do with this money? Well, I want to buy a house. I've got a mortgage on that house. I've got to make $500, $1,000, $1,500 a month payments, or sometimes even more, on that house for 30 years. And if I'm not here, I need to make sure that my spouse has that money to make those premiums. Also, I've got a young child or 2 or 3, and those kids need to go to college if they're able to. How much is it going to cost to send them to college? Is my spouse going to have a job or be in a position to be able to pay that kind of money for that purpose? And those numbers add up pretty quickly. You talk about $500,000 worth of life insurance. If you're 25, 30 years old, that's not a lot of life insurance.
Right. And that's the importance of that needs analysis. And, you know, it's helpful if someone can sit down with an insurance professional and work through that needs analysis and identify truly what their need is, and take into consideration maybe there's some insurance provided through work already. Maybe parents had previously bought a policy for the child who now is 30 years old. Maybe there's some other things that are in place. But, you know, really evaluating that and trying to make some decision of, hey, what are our needs and how can we begin to address those? And it's so critical that people do that, because to not do that really places so much risk then on the family and trying to recover if something does happen and the dollars aren't there.
We're talking about life insurance. My guest is Michael A. Oliveria II. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. So in your younger days, you may need a large amount of life insurance, a big pile of cash to take care of your young family. As you get older, the needs for that money decrease somewhat. You don't have to have as much. And that's where whole life comes into the picture. Yeah. It's a little more expensive. Well, it's quite a bit more expensive, frankly. But you can buy it, and it's there, and it doesn't. If you become uninsurable, you still have it.
Right. You know, sometimes people's needs change over time. Sometimes they come down, as you described. Sometimes their needs go up over time, and that's why it's important on an occasional basis to, you know, continually meet with that representative, insurance agent, financial planner, whoever is filling that role for you, to continue to stay on top of that changing needs going forward. And what we find is the whole life insurance or products similar to whole life. We'll hear the universal life, the variable life, these products that allow some accumulation of cash value and create certainly the potential of having a death benefit in place for your whole life. Those products have a place to play in maintaining coverage where a term policy at some point will end. You know, there used to be term policies available at the airport where somebody could go to the airport and put some money in a machine and they would get a term insurance policy for the term of the flight. There are term policies for 10 years called Term 10, or even 20 years, Term 20. And then there are term policies out to a certain age. Somebody may be familiar with a Term 70 or a Term 80. So there are different types of term insurance, but the coverage all comes to an end at the end of the term.
And that's the important thing to be aware of there. If you have a life insurance policy, it's inexpensive, it has good coverage, big coverage, but it's for a term of years. At the end of that term of years, you're either without insurance or you have to buy more insurance. And the rates are going to be based at that time upon your health and your situation. And if that at that time you're a private pilot, a skydiver, a scuba diver, a diabetic, or suffer from some other infirmity or injury that reduces your likelihood of surviving, that insurance, if it's available at all, is going to be expensive.
And the challenge for some people too is a lot of people believe if they work at a place that has good benefits, that they're taken care of. And they think, well, I work here and we have 1.5 times our income or 2 times our income in life insurance. Well, if you were to do that needs analysis, you would probably figure out that that's not nearly enough life insurance. But if you would evaluate your benefits through work, you would also learn that those benefits go away when you leave that job, or even if you stay at that job for a long time and retire, those life insurance benefits, that policy of insurance is gone.
It's term insurance, but the term is the length of your employment.
Yeah. Most people are in a position where they will need some type of life insurance that sticks with them, that is portable, that regardless of where they work, or even if in times when they're not working, they have life insurance in place. And that's something that working with an individual insurance agent, they can offer you that type of coverage that's not tied to your employment or going to go away if you simply change jobs or retire.
So we have term insurance at one end of this continuum, we have whole life at the other end, and then in the middle is these combination policies that can automatically, or sometimes you have to make the affirmative election to turn some of the term insurance into whole life insurance.
Right.
Over the years.
All kinds of different policies. Different carriers have products that maybe start out with a portion of the product being whole life and a portion of the product being term, but it's all one product. And over time, as you pay those premiums, more and more of the product becomes whole life. There are universal life products. Universal life sometimes is easiest to think about if we had sort of 2 buckets. In one bucket is the portion that has to pay the expenses of the mortality costs and expenses, and in the other bucket is the cash value that's being accumulated. If the universal life product works properly, there's enough money going into the bucket to pay the expenses, and there's money left over growing so that you have cash value at the end. Sometimes the universal life product can get a little bit out of whack, and those expenses are creeping higher and faster than the cash value is growing. There are variable life policies. Sometimes people want more exposure to the stock market. They want to invest in equities. These types of products have to be sold by insurance agents who have a securities license. This is really the only type of life insurance that is, quote, considered a security. And those products allow the customer to have their funds invested in separate accounts from the company's general account. So if you buy a traditional whole life insurance policy, the dollars that you're investing into the policy are placed in the company's general account. And you really can't control how those dollars are invested. Whereas if you buy a variable life insurance policy, those dollars are then put into a separate account and you can direct those investments and hoping that you can outperform the company's general account product. More risk associated with those.
One of the benefits that comes with having this whole life type of product is that sometimes the insurance policy can fund, at least in part, itself, because whole life policies do accumulate a cash value. It's a value you can borrow against, and it's a value that you can use to pay part of your premiums in the upcoming years. So the amount of your insurance actually can go up, your premium stays constant, or maybe even goes down because of the money that's being made by the policy, because you're dealing with typically big companies who have the ability to invest large amounts of money and to get returns that, well, you and I could never get on our own.
You talk about dividends. I don't know that any companies would guarantee that a dividend would be paid.
Guarantee me what the stock market's going to do.
Yes,
you can't.
There are some companies that have a long history of paying dividends, but the way a dividend can be used, let's just say that a policy costs $1,000 a year, and after many years of owning the policy, the dividend in a particular year is maybe $1,200. Well, somebody could choose to direct $1,000 of that $1,200 toward the premium, not make the premium payment, still have the life insurance in force and have the remaining $200 be into the cash value and maybe be purchasing some additional life insurance. So at some point dividends could be used, not a guarantee, but could be used to offset premiums. They also can be used simply to purchase additional life insurance and grow the policy.
You know, listening to this, I find it interesting because I think I sort of kind of understand the life insurance business with your help over the years, but you may not. Life insurance is complex. Find a life insurance agent that you're comfortable with, perhaps talk to your friends, get references, do some reading on your own in books, magazines, or on the internet, but investigate this. It's not the only form of investment you should have. It's part of planning for the future, planning to help your family. Mike Oliverio, thank you very much, Mike, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the Law Works, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening.
If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The Law Works show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the Law Works website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The Law Works programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the Law Works programs on YouTube and iTunes.
The Law Works is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. Additional support for the Law Works is provided by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.